Now we have an impressive lineup of panelists, and I'm excited. I'm super excited to have them introduce themselves. But first, a few words from Charlie Robertello. Charlie.
Thank you, Moran. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists and guests. So our discussion today is focused on edge computing and 5G, how the two technologies are operating in industry and the benefits they're bringing to industry today. We'll get into the details on that with our panelists here as we go along. I'd like to introduce myself. So I've been with Hub Security since July of last year. Prior to that, spent 6 years at Sony Corporation and left to start my own cybersecurity company, oddly enough, 30 years ago. That was technology that kind of was a foundation for what I'm doing here today with my team at Hub Security, which was access control using encryption technology and smart card technology. So we'll discuss today how that, some of that at least, comes into play here at Hub Security. In addition to Sony, I was the first VP of sales at Secure Computing, running the Sidewinder firewall program, which was built for the NSA. And we commercialized that offering, went public a year after I joined the company. Also at VeriSign as general manager, F5 Networks, Raytheon as general manager, HP Security, Radware, another Israeli company, spent about 5 years there, and Checkmark's application security, which I was at for about 6 years prior to joining Hub. What we do here today regarding edge computing is securing that environment where the edge computing environment is out in potentially in the field or on a factory floor, using very high speed technology as an appliance, which allows for very low latency, which is a fundamental requirement for edge computing environments. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail as we go into the discussion, which I hope you enjoy. I'd like to thank our honored guests here who are distinguished panelists, and mainly they are spending their time with us today to kick this program off. So with that, Moran, I'll kick it back to you if you want to make the rest of the introductions. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, Charlie. We're so glad you could be here with us today. Now, I'd like to take a few minutes to do a quick introduction round. We'll start with Stephen. Can you share with our listeners a bit about yourself and your field of expertise?
Sure thing. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to the co-presenters and Hub Security for the invite to be here today to speak. I'm Stephen Spellacy. I lead service provider marketing within VMware's service provider and edge business unit. Historically, my background is both a mix of enterprise IT technologies, having worked for companies like Dell EMC, also HPE, similar to Charlie in pedigree, in product marketing and product management lead roles. And on the software side, very focused on software intelligence from an analytics perspective. I really kind of focus on those two rails, enterprise IT and telecom. And my role at VMware is all focused around driving the messaging and promotion of our core platforms, which are used to modernize telco networks to enable telcos to also monetize those networks as well. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, Chetan Kumar. Hi.
Hey, thank you, Moran. So good evening, good afternoon, everyone. This is Chetan here. I've been with Mavenir Systems for last 18 months. So here at Mavenir Systems, I head the 5G private networks and as well as edge computing. I'm really honored to be here today as a panelist in this discussion on power of 5G and edge computing and what it brings to our industry. A little bit on my background, I have around 25 years of experience, so mostly in the enterprise and telco IT solutions. So I've been working in companies like Cisco Systems, Juniper Networks, Alcatel-Lucent. So predominantly working on the datacom and telecom areas. I wore many hats in the past. I was heading the engineering, and I was owning the product. I was an entrepreneur myself just before Mavenir Systems, wherein we worked on solving the problems of orchestrating distributed edge computing applications. Also worked as a guest faculty at a couple of universities. Looking forward to share my insights and experience. And most importantly, I'm looking forward to learn more from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnny Ellum, hi. Johnny?
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm Johnny, having solid 20 years experience in telecommunications solution, IT solutions. I started my career from 1G. So now we're driving for 5G and approaching to the 6G. And between also enterprise transformation, especially cloud solutions, cybersecurity, IoT, blockchain, and all the edge technology. And I have been leading cross-functional project program for Ericsson and around the globe, our tier 1 customer, and have been leading a lot of transformational project in these days, especially not limited to the IT or telecommunication, but all this enterprise, all the vertical I'm covering. And I'm quite passionate about solve the problem in innovative way. I drive for those and I capture the value for customer and bring the optimization and of course this precious value for Ericsson and around all the customers I work in. And I think it will be quite exciting discussion and happy to be part on that part. Thanks.
Thank you. Elizabeth Rumsey, hi.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a global senior product manager in Vodafone Business. I've been in the product team in Vodafone for just over 3 years now. I've been at Vodafone as a whole for over 10 years. I'm very proud that when I first moved into product, I was in the edge computing space where my team led our first ever launch of multi-access edge computing on public 5G. We started out with a site in the UK, which is now 2 sites, and then we launched a further 3 in Germany by the end of 2021. Since then, more recently, I've moved over to lead our portfolio in mobile private networks.
Thank you. Hi, Dr. Guru Prasad.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Prasad. In my present role, I had COE for edge computing. I'm happy to be a part of this fantastic panel. Just a quick background. I'm an undergraduate in electronics, master's in communication. I did my PhD from Census and IoT. I've worked with various startups and global giants like Rolls-Royce. From last 5 years, I'm with Bosch. My current capacity and focus now on bringing edge computing into automotive, very specifically sideband 5G and edge computing towards connected mobility and intelligent mobility. Looking forward for this discussion.
Thank you. And last but not least, Terry Jensen.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you can hear me. Sorry, I've been late. I don't see any video actually. So I'm Terry Jensen, if you can hear me. So I'm heading up the network and cloud strategy in Telenor. So it's part of the Telenor Group technology. I've been at 4 decades in this industry, and then lastly been working on private networks and also on our strategies on edge cloud and the combination of private network and edge cloud. So Telenor is an operator. We are in 8 different countries, more than 175 million customers in Asia and in Europe.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you all so much. We're going to divide today's event into 3 topics: market and technology overview, challenges and risks, and solutions and approaches. Our first topic is a brief introduction of the market and technology. Stephen, what are the key factors driving enterprises to deploy private 5G?
Well, we all have 5G in our pocket, right? With respect, hopefully, to coverage around the globe. Lots and lots of activity with spectrum auctions and deployments of 5G. There's now reality out there. We're starting to see deployments and people are using the services. But the enterprise, by and large, is still sort of lagging behind the adoption of 5G. Private 5G enables them to put that stake in the ground and to actually create that opportunity to bring 5G to the enterprise. The ultimate goal of that, of that action is to help digitize and modernize that business so they can digitally transform how they work, how they operate, and ultimately seek gains in productivity. Those productivity gains will turn into profits. When we think about the industries that are really glomming on to the idea of bringing private connectivity, it goes beyond connectivity as a service, but it's really about enabling and empowering new use cases that can use the technology to transform how they operate. Things like massive broadband and ultra reliable low latency communications are enablers of 5G that will help connect machines and allow them to communicate in the factory or in retail or logistics to improve how these businesses operate.
Thank you, Stephen. Terry, are there any specific industry verticals that are the first to adopt private 5G?
Yeah, I think we can. So we are having several engagement in a number of industries actually, and quite a few also commercial contracts. So we are delivering private networks in combination with edge cloud, of course, in some of them. So the verticals, just a few examples of where we are working are, for example, on oil and gas, both on onshore and offshore. And then the health sector, we are working in peacekeeping.
1 second, Terry. We can hear you, but we cannot see you.
No, I don't see you either. So that's mutual.
Okay.
No, sorry, the video is completely frozen, so I can probably disconnect if you can try that, if that works.
Okay. Terry, are you there?
I think he took the disconnect literally. He's going to come back in.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption, Terry.
No, it seems like he's rebooting.
Okay, so we'll let Terry reconnect.
No, maybe someone else want to tackle the question in the meantime.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
So yeah, so the question was, are there any specific industry verticals that are the first to adopt private 5G?
I can jump in on that one if it helps.
Perfect.
So Terry started talking about oil and gas. I would absolutely agree with him there. He also mentioned health. I think the classic one we talk about a lot with Industry 4.0 is manufacturing. And then we also see a lot of opportunities in transportation, logistics, and more sort of public sector supported things like universities, for example, who want to look at 5G and private networks more from a research and development point of view with their ecosystems. Those would be the main ones that come to mind for me. Any that I've missed that resonate with the panel?
Yes, I think the utility sector, we are doing that one for this private cloud, and also mining sector. So like we have a lot of work on this North America, especially in US. We are doing that one for AT&T and T-Mobile. So these are the quite, I think, additional, because the last part I already covered.
Yeah, smart meters, obviously playing off of what Johnny's just said, smart meter infrastructure, which is typically deployed in a widespread location. It's, using traditional, 2G, 3G type technologies. And as those evolutions are being forced through sunset, there needs to be a replacement, right? And 5G can offer that opportunity to replace it.
Exactly.
We have a question from Daniel. When we hear everyone is connected via 5G, how much will we be concerned about cybersecurity risks, especially in industrial operations? Chetan, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, so there are, as we talk about, like everybody is connected. So obviously, when you talk about security, we define something called attack surface. So now, as we make, in my opinion, as we make system more and more complex, essentially we start creating more and more attack surfaces. And as more and more people get connected, more and more devices get connected, essentially we are increasing the attack surfaces. So this opens up quite a significant challenges in the cybersecurity. Now, if you look at 5G as a technology itself, the standards have been developed by adapting secure by design approach, in which case, as compared to its predecessors like 3G, 4G, and other things, like 5G is definitely a lot more secure. It introduces some additional controls like mutual authentication, then subscriber identity protections. These are a couple of additional security mechanisms that brings in, that makes the 5G as a network more secure. But what it really opens up is the 5G network itself is a lot more distributed as compared to its predecessors, right? I mean, the network is, when I say distributed, what happens is like you have a lot of disaggregated network elements there, like you have the RAN component, which is completely distributed in a disaggregated manner. You have the core components are distributed. So essentially, there is no clear perimeter here in the 5G network. I mean, if I could say that. So what this brings up is your network assets sort of spans across your service providers, then enterprise, and as well as cloud providers, right? This sort of really opens up a lot more attack surfaces, and which sort of introduces a lot more challenge in the cybersecurity challenges. And now, from the solutions point of view, I mean, what people are looking at it, like so essentially, as I said, the network has to be made secure by itself, and apart from that, the platforms has to be made by secure itself. Now, you need to look at it as a holistic model, looking at more like a platform approach to create a zero trust network, to make sure the all the assets, what you're talking about in the 5G network is secure enough is what we need to look at it. That's how we'll have to look at the solutions here.
Does edge computing have any other security implications, Charlie?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I did want to add a point there, so I appreciate that, Moran. So what Shaitan explained, of course, is correct. It's the protocol and the network is more secure than its predecessors. However, the edge computing that's connected, which is a small, let's call it a data center, that's where the exposure, the attack surface he alluded to as well, becomes a security challenge, right? It's typically the edge computing environment doesn't have all of the same level of equipment for security, deep firewalls, application controls, and so forth at the edge. Not to make this a commercial about hub security, but that's exactly what we do, is we minimize the requirement for all of the technologies that exist in a large data center to be redundant at the edge. And by that I mean we are essentially providing a very secure enclave within the edge computing environment to protect it when we don't have access to all of the resources, both people, processes, technologies that would exist in a full data center. So hopefully that adds some color to that. I don't know if anyone else wants to piggyback on that and add comment to that.
Yes, hi, thanks. I believe, yeah, so like authentication and authorization. So these the two parameters actually is playing the great role on this 5G with the edge computing. So like whenever, based on the survey and a lot of articles, actually we can see that one, like more than 70% attack which happen for the mistake or like for the human made the things. So in that case, actually authorization, so like what he can access and what these things, and authorizations like what he can do. So if we can control that one, so then actually edge and the 5G, all these things actually we could measure the initial stage, and then from the different level of from the VM, from the service level, then actually is the cloud level, then network protocol and the services. All this ecosystem actually is it could be the secureable, and we can measure that one. So in that space, actually, we need to define these protocols and the processes, and of course, we need to design those security parameters.
We have a couple questions from our listeners. Stephen, smart meters do not necessarily need 5G. Any connectivity is good, even with intermittent connectivity. Do you think there is a reason why smart meters may need 5G, except for the fact that one day when 2 to 4G ceased to exist?
Well, definitely the force of the shutdown of those bands and frequencies are going to force a need for a new network. But there are replacements on 5G with narrowband IoT, which can enhance communications. The viewer is correct in saying intermittent connectivity is acceptable, and that is true based on what's happening. I think the game changes when energy providers start to look at mining data that comes from the smart meters themselves. So doing more processing resident on the smart devices. This will require more processing, but it also will require more communication, persistent communication, potentially communication that's offloaded in the cloud, which would require additional bandwidth and latency requirements.
Thank you, Stephen. Guru, how is 5G going to affect edge computing? I mean, 5G release 13 to 15, that is.
It's a fantastic question. A lot of people ponder on it. I think we should take a step back and understand what is expected out of edge compute compared to cloud compute. Point number one, we are looking at use cases which are suffered by latency. Point number two, use cases suffered by bandwidth. Point number three, storage cost at the cloud. And point four is data privacy. If 5G comes in very strongly, gets adopted across the globe, there are very few use cases which will get supported by it. Maybe, for example, if a use case is suffered by bandwidth, a 5G replacing 4G will surely help. But there are other use cases. For example, I have to react in near real time, where I can't expect cloud to run AI algorithms, bring that inference back onto the edge device and act on top of it. I think even if 5G comes in, edge compute will play a very strong role, but there is a small portion of use cases which are expected to actually get solved by 5G, but edge compute for sure is a fundamental enabler for 5G to use.
If I may, Miranda, a good example of that is industrial computing. I think, Elizabeth, that was one of the list of verticals, let's say, that you noted, where in a factory floor, you have to have that high-speed communication between all the equipment on the floor. That, as you just said, Dr. Prasad, you can't have the delay, the latency going out to the cloud and back when you have very precise and precision equipment in operation. Same thing with autonomous vehicles eventually, right? I don't think you want to wait, 400 milliseconds to understand that you're about to smash the car in front of you, right? Right. So anyway, but thank you. That was a good example of the value of both 5G and edge computing in unison. Sorry, Maura, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, that's great. We got a couple questions. Well, actually, a couple of our viewers want to hear more about use cases, specifically mining, multi-access edge computing, AI.
Maybe I'll try to go first.
Okay.
So if you fundamentally look at which use cases will be early adopters for 5G and edge, any use cases which are presently suffered by poor connectivity, which means to say, if I don't have proper connectivity, can the data produced at the devices be consumed at the devices and an inference can be quickly generated? Point number one. Point number two, if I don't have any network, it is imperative that I need to have device-to-device communication or a machine-to-machine communication. And that is where a cellular network might not help. For example, a use case like mining, you cannot expect a cellular communication inside a deep mine. And that is where 5G sideband can help bring a machine to talk to a machine without a necessity of a cellular network. I think some of such use cases which are presently suffered by the four advantages of edge compute will actually be adopted.
Do you hear me now? Sorry, Terry again.
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear
we can.
you and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can see you. Hi, Terry.
Yeah, sorry. No, I just got offer something on the because we have a commercial contract on the mining case, if you may. So it's a combination actually of a private network and edge cloud. And the customer need is actually, there are a couple of needs they have. They want to remotely control some of the heavy machinery. They're actually sitting in the office and running the big machinery. So that is asking for a low latency case. So that's just an example of what we call a local breakout or regional breakout with a local control as well. So that's asking again from edge cloud plus a 5G network just to make that happen. So and the same mining case is also asking for a lot of cameras for safety. There are a lot of sensors around, also for safety, and they are monitoring a lot of movements on the ground and so on. So there are quite a lot of things and devices which need to be connected, and then of course the capacity offered by what we call C-band is very good to have also as part of the 5G. And then I just noticed, I think there is we are actually also delivering public network services in tunnels, just to me. So we are actually doing in inside mines, and the reason for that is both partly that there, in case of an emergency, the blue light or the emergency service, police, ambulance, whatever, need to have coverage, and they actually prefer the public network coverage when they are going into a tunnel. So it's also in the mine, in some case, there needs to be a combination of private and public network. So just to be contributing to the discussion around that one. And of course, one way to do it is actually to use the public network spectrum, and then rather using, as I said, a local breakout and edge cloud setup to support this.
Thank you, Terry. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was just going to say, just to add to the great list of use cases we've just had there, one more that comes to mind that we haven't touched on yet for me is in the area of mixed reality. One of the things we're seeing, it goes across a number of verticals, including energy and utilities and also manufacturing, is guided supported maintenance, where you're using augmented reality, for example, where you are getting the instructions on top of the equipment you're looking at and potentially also dialing in an expert who's based remotely. For me, thinking about not only the future of hybrid work, but of how we're evolving as a workforce with multiple generations in the workforce, I find that really interesting in terms of thinking about how we can leverage technology to have that training facilitated as we pass across to new generations.
I think to add to
Yes,
that,
yeah, please go ahead.
To add to your computer vision example, Elizabeth, the other thing that's becoming prevalent is using video monitoring for surveillance within factories and logistics centers, in addition to autonomous mobile robots. These are the things that are going to keep factories and logistics centers running 24/7, 365. When you have this level of requirement for persistent communications between devices, you need technology like 5G in order to accomplish that. And you need cellular technology to be able to avoid things like massive interference in facilities. You need the technology to be instrumented in the factory for maximum coverage and capacity to be able to deliver signal to those very critical sensors that may be in robots or maybe in cameras that are related to ensuring productivity or ensuring safety on the floor.
Thank you, Stephen. Let's now move on to our next topic, challenges and risks. I want to start with you, Terry. What is holding operators back from offering more advanced and integrated edge services? We have a similar question from our viewers. When do you think we're going to see migration from cloud-based applications to edge-based applications?
We're actually moving applications as we speak in some of the customer cases. So it's already starting. Of course, we can argue about the speed and the volumes. But coming back to the question about what's holding us back, I think a bit of a reality check is that compared to some forecast a couple of years back, I think we are moving slower than the forecast. I'm being saying earlier in some events that I think it's actually a good thing. The reason is that that we need a bit of maturing, and the whole ecosystem need to be a bit of maturing on how to do this. So I think it's both on the technology readiness, it's also on the competency, and if you go into the operator telco space, it's also, you know, the sales force needs to be skilled in order to sell these kind of things. So you have the whole, you know, all the puzzles needs to be put together, and then of course you need to have customers who wants it. And I think that's also what we have seen, that it's a bit slower actually in some of the markets than compared to the original forecast. So I think there are challenges spanning all the way. But having said that, it's actually a great interest from a number of customers. And I think what you see from the enterprise space, at least, that these kind of things doesn't come by themselves. It's typically triggered by they want to change their processes, they want to invest in something. So it's kind of related to what they want to do anyway. And then they asking for edge and private network, typically in that, in particular in the edge cloud. So it's a major digitalization maybe on from the enterprise side, and that's of course is a decision they have to make themselves. Of course we can bring the awareness and point to reference cases, similar kind of customers and so on, but still, you know, they have to take it back and do their own calculation on, okay, yes, we can get the savings, this is how we should do it, we have the competency to do it, and so forth. So I think it's actually a big puzzle, but I think we are actually breaking it through these reference cases and building a customer cases and building it's actually a growing pipeline. I think we see in most of the markets now on piling up to enter on these edge services. And back to the other question, yes, applications are moving as we speak. So it's happening.
Thank you, Terry. Stephen, enterprises are not RF or cellular experts. What investments are required for deploying your own private 5G networks? And what will it take to succeed?
Sure. Great question. I mean, I mentioned that we all have 5G in our pocket. We all understand from the usability of cellular technology, right, as a cell phone or a device that's connected to a network. And, you know, IT understands connectivity, but when we start to look at planning connectivity, deploying connectivity that's cellular based or radio frequency based, it's more complex for IT. From our perspective at VMware, we work with 99.8% of the world's enterprise Global 2000, you know, Fortune 500s are using our technology. So we understand the gaps that exist between what IT knows and what IT doesn't know. And private networking, private mobile networking, private networking for 5G or even 4G are, you know, that they're a bit of a, you know, a black art. They require specific skills. Where we've seen success with operators who have services that are associated with building these solutions and deploying them at scale. Telcos get RF. They have RF planners, designers, engineers. They understand how to do radio planning and antenna placement and all of the things that are related to the physicality of deploying the network. Another big gap for enterprise IT outside of this, you know, this mysticism around what is cellular and what is, you know, traditional sort of connectivity, Ethernet, Wi-Fi even, is they're really looking for solutions that are easy to use, not only easy to deploy. So the user interface itself and how they onboard devices into their network and how they monitor those devices, whether it's in the IT side of the house or on the OT or operational technology side of the house, with respect to things like factories. They need those tools to be very easy to use, easy to onboard devices, and easy to troubleshoot. And that's where the stretch in skills, I think, is really happening right now.
Thank you, Stephen. Charlie, what security measures must be taken to ensure the safety of data on edge computing and 5G?
Sure, thank you. Before I answer that, Dr. Prasad, you were, I think, going to make a comment earlier. If you want to jump in, and I'll answer the data privacy piece and security.
Yeah, no. I think there was one question on when will we move out of cloud towards edge. I think it's important that as thought leaders, we should make one thing very clear, that please do not think that edge will replace cloud. both of them have to coexist. I think it's a wrong message. Edge will only enable some of the use cases which are not presently catered by cloud. And there are multiple manifestations of edge, which could be today, if you look at cloud compute and its architecture, it's more like you acquire data from the devices, ship the data through the network to cloud, and do everything at cloud. And that is what we call it as cloud heavy. And what we are looking at is edge heavy, which means to see where are the opportunities for us to reduce the load on the cloud, load on the network, and ensure that the compute capability is well utilized at the edge. And for sure, cloud compute will not go away. But edge compute will enable a lot of use cases which are presently suffered by cloud compute traditional architecture.
Thank you. So that's actually something I can piggyback on. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been in the cybersecurity, information security space for about 30 years, but prior to that at Sony, responsible for, in those days, MIS, which included a mainframe. And the parallel here in this scenario is, as you just mentioned, Dr. Prasad, the cloud we look at as a very secure, very large enclave, if you will, much like mainframes were many years ago. And now we're looking at PCs starting to come in, hanging off of, in my days, token ring network. And as you said, Stephen, Ethernet, right now, Wi-Fi, which has its own set of security challenges naturally. But now we're into the edge. So to me, I look at this as going from a very secure mainframe environment, dumb terminals hanging off of it, going through the transition we've gone through all these years into networking, own security challenges, but it was within a building, then Wi-Fi, which now has new challenges, and now we're taking it to the edge. And the edge has a new set of challenges, where, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have the same level of security devices, people, processes at the edge like we do inside a network, inside a cloud. So that's the challenge we have, and that's what we address as hub security. It's a unique challenge because some of these locations, as Johnny mentioned, mining, they're very remote environments. What we didn't talk about is emergency management, which I think is another vertical that's out there, that suddenly there's an event, and we're essentially something we're actually working on with Bosch is dropping a data center anywhere in the world where we have 5G connectivity. How do you secure that, right? It's an emergency environment. You need to drop it in place. You're connected through 5G. What's the security posture? So that's what we bring to the table. Again, I'm not going to make this a sales pitch here at all, but that's a solution we bring using, I would say, very sophisticated technology that minimizes all of the security components that you would normally have in a large data center in a very small edge-based, not data center, but solution. So hopefully, Moran, that's answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Charlie. From our viewers, do you see limitations in the number of 5G devices that are standalone compatible? A further issue. I think, Johnny, you could answer. Elizabeth?
No. So just I missed that query. Can you just repeat that one? Yeah, I'll love to answer those.
Okay. Do you see limitations in the number of 5G devices that are standalone compatible? A further issue?
No, because when I see that one, this is the three really distinct parameter for 5G. So one is MTC, so massive mobile connectivity, and also machine connectivity. So in that space, actually, number of the device I didn't see, or I don't think there is a. It could be the limitation. And of course, when I did the second parameter, so like edge broadband connectivity. So in that space also, I didn't see anything limited on that space. So where we can mitigate any type of challenges, but it can be more valuable or precious, like when we don't have the connectivity, or a device is there is a two portion of the part. One actually is the when is the highly densited, so we can cover our 5G standalone network is the capable to manage that one. And another hand, where actually we don't have the network or very limited service, in that space also we could cover narrowband narrowband IoT and these type of services, which it will be covered. And then a new flavor actually adding when we are not working only for traditional cloud or data center, but we have this edge computing. In that space also we can analyze, we can process, and we can store data on that perspective. So it's replacing also RAN capability for 5G standalone and the traditional telecommunication and IT infrastructure, where actually we adding this type of features and value on that.
Stephen, you started answering some questions in writing, but
yeah, my point to build off of what Johnny was saying is depending on the market, you see availability of UEs or user equipment for cellular devices or handsets, sensors as well. Depending on the market, you're gated typically by the radio vendor's support of the bands and the frequencies of that particular market or region, and that range of spectrum. So we're seeing as we build our solutions with our partners in the ecosystem, we're seeing those new supported bands and features for different frequencies emerge. But there are examples of some markets that have already launched where we have prevalent operators who are in those markets who are offering standalone, and the handset options are very limited in those cases.
Stephen, thank you so much. We can now move on to our final topic for today, solutions and approaches. Elizabeth, how to build and scale edge?
How to build and scale edge. I think one of the things I think with edge right now is it's a question of what do you mean when you say edge, and I think that's been part of the problem with the adoption of it, is that is the edge on the device? Is it on the site? Is it on a network? I mean, the difference between, as you said, the device in your pocket and all the way out to the cloud, there are lots of flavors of edge. So I think one of the things to build and scale is for the enterprise to think about the strategy of what edge they need for the use cases that they have. We've talked a lot about the edge as that where it sits alongside a private network. We refer to that as a dedicated edge in Vodafone. And I see a lot of benefit there, because what you are doing with the private network is you're ensuring that you have the connectivity, whereas that's a challenge still today, especially with the ongoing rollout of 5G. Connectivity is a challenge when you've got edge on the public network. So I think that's one of the factors. I also think a big factor in terms of building and scaling is that the edge has to fit into basically a hybrid cloud strategy that most enterprises would have. And with that, and thank you, whoever commented on my mid-Atlantic accent, apologies. But I think one of the challenges as you scale is how do you manage that complexity? How do you manage the complexity of that environment? So I think that's one of the other key factors that we have to take into account and make sure we have easy solutions for as we build and scale, because the reality is the world is multi-cloud and multi-edge.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I think Johnny wanted to add on to that, Warren.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important question. What is edge? A lot of people actually consume edge in different way. For example, I represent Bosch, where we also look into mobility as one of our key verticals and non-mobility. Whenever I speak of non-mobility and try to explain edge, a simple sensor which was made intelligent is also called as an edge sensor, right? For example, when I go to a mobility expert and then ask him what is edge, for him, edge is edge of a car, which means a telematics unit which actually handles data and takes responsibility of sending this data to cloud is actually edge for him, right? Anything which is actually done on the telematics units, which is the edge of a car, is actually edge computing for mobility. Whereas if you go to non-mobility, the bottommost component, which is a sensor, where an intelligence is provided, a security is provided, a sensor can actually talk to another unit with some other wireless technology, that is also an edge. I think this is a very, very tricky question, and it purely depends on what use cases that we are handling and what is the best method for us to bring edge at what layer.
Yes. Actually, I like to add here. So telemedicine and healthcare, this is like revolutionary. So like when 5G also, like RAN capability is not sufficient when we are using the traditional data center. So edge actually really intelligent on this space, and this is will be like, I believe, the next revolution. And another part, like I also add on that part for my early space. That one is like a self-drive car and this type of and VR and AR. So when actually video streaming actually is playing the great role, and then make them the intelligence by the narrowband IoT or broadband IoT and or automated IoT. So in that space, so we can create them intelligent and cover those things. So here actually really edge computing and MEC, they had the real great potentiality where we can I can bring that a revolution.
A couple questions from our viewers. Is
Hang on 1 second. Sorry, Shaitan wanted to make a comment. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, Shaitan.
Hey, no problem. Yeah. So I just want to add what Elizabeth and Guru was talking about, right? I think the specific thing in terms of the definition of edge becomes very fluid, right? So I sort of have a try to define that in a following way. So you have something what is called mobile edge, right? Which essentially you can actually put in all the compute that happens on the mobile devices, which includes your the vehicle, which includes your sensors, all those things are what I would call it as a mobile edge, right? Mobile device edge. And then you have what is called private MEC. You could call it as a private MEC, or you could call it as a enterprise edge, is where the most of the applications and compute happens within an enterprise. It's you're scaling up from a mobile edge to a private MEC, and from there you have what is called a public MEC, right? And public MEC is like something provided by MNOs, like provided by the operators, but then like it's something like an infrastructure closer to where application runs, similar to your edge cloud, but then that's a public MEC. And then from there, you have what I could call it as a edge data center. So an edge data center is where you probably would create a data center closer to a zone or a state or something like that, wherein you would probably want to run applications. I mean, I'm just giving an example, like stock market applications, you would want to run an edge data center, right? So that's how we could classify the edge. And then so coming back to Elizabeth's question, I mean, rather whatever Elizabeth was trying to answer. Now, sort of how do we start scaling up this application really depends on which portion of the edge which we are talking about, right? If we're talking about mobile device edge, the problems are different versus private MEC and public MEC and edge data center.
Thank you.
Okay, so couple questions from our viewers. Is anyone working on use cases in railways?
Yes. Short answer, yes, definitely in multiple countries. Yes. I'm trying to think in terms of, I suppose so that was the answer to the question.
Do you have
I mean thinking about the use cases that go along that, and I think for most of these verticals, I mean you initially will have perhaps a first use case that justifies the initial putting in the infrastructure, but the reality is once you've got the infrastructure there in terms of private network and the edge computing, what you're really looking to do is layer use cases on top of each other. So it's not generally going to be just one for any one customer site. I think thinking about rail, you've got aspects like, for example, real-time video analytics, for example, driving some of those use cases.
Yeah, in my past life, having led product at Thales within one of their software businesses, we focused heavily on transportation, and rail was a very important aspect of that. And what we've seen in the modernization of rail is not only looking at improving connectivity for entertainment on the train, but also timing, security, safety, as Elizabeth said. These are all critical elements. When they build the next generation trains, they're going to be mostly automated with, an operator who can intervene. So they're looking at some of the same use cases from a smart city perspective that you'd see with autonomous vehicles on the highway. These are concerns about timing, they're concerns about visibility, accident prevention, and many other probably more complex use cases.
Exactly. So exactly what we're looking at in the wider transport sector around V2X. You can see, because of the defined routes that the rail sector takes, they're able to enjoy adopting that sort of V2X technology faster, perhaps, than the wider environment when you think about cars.
Smart monitoring as well, so any signals or anything, so you can control multi-dimensioning, and as mentioned, that is like autonomous signalings and other things. So actually is a central position that where 5G and edge computing, especially on that space, so we can control those things. And really multiple use cases as mentioned. So really we do that one, like one infrastructure is ready, so multiple use cases we can drive on that.
Within a train or within an airplane, there are multiple networks.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So they have to communicate between each other. And then if you think about it as a set of cabins on a train or multiple trains on the same track, to Elizabeth's point and to Johnny's, you've got to be able to communicate with the other things. So the V2X and V2V really have to be a part of the strategy, but then there's components inside within the systems themselves which need to be monitored.
And also metering, when actually Tejay already mentioned that one earlier, that is the smart metering and other things. So prevention, any type of incident, so we can predict that one and we can indicate that one. So before happening anything, so we can indicate that one and we can take the measure on that. So this is really, and also a transportation like airlines or the train or any autonomous transportation. So we can do these things. So it's the part of the smart city as well. So other part also we can cover that.
Thank you, Johnny. Another question from our viewers. To what order of magnitude do you believe customers will be willing to pay more for services at the edge? Johnny?
Yes, because yes, yeah, thank you. So I believe they will do that one, because when we bring that more innovative services for edge, and this is really especially you can see following options. One is the high performance, then the innovative, we never got that one, and of course we can mitigate even that is a performance upgradations, which is the use cases actually we bring maybe not the effectively, especially the utility. That's why I think even also the mining sector. So there actually is a lot of life threat and other things, firefighter also. If we in that space actually government and this service organization will pay, this magnitude will be quite high. And then it's service organization, like a generic service or entertainment, or it could be the VR and AR, and we can bring a lot of things for not only the entertainment, also the real scenario for our Web3 applications. So all this is space actually when customer get the value, and we can bring by the use cases, and we can prove that value to our customers. So definitely it is they will pay for more. And for the age, actually this will bring this type of use case in a life.
But I think if I make an offer, I think it's an interesting question whether the customer is really paying for the edge service, or they are paying for a service with low latency kind of supporting, I know where my data is and so forth. So I think a bit careful on how we are looking upon. So So I think the customers, at least a lot of the customers we are talking with, are more paying for low latency, 6 nines, and those kind of things. That's what they really want to pay for. And then of course they understand that this requires an edge to deliver. Which is kind of the second question of it. Of course, some of them are also asking for an on-premises kind of edge cloud. And then, of course, they are paying directly for that. So they recognize that. But a bit careful on, I think, on how I would phrase the understanding on what they are paying for, actually. Or want to pay for,
yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I think this is quite precious. So think about that one. Maybe we cannot ask directly to that like edge service we have, and customer need to pay on that one. So then actually customer will not pay. Like I'm quite pretty sure on that part. But when we bring the services to that one based on those low latency and the innovative services, so definitely when is the innovative service then? Like for iPhone, I pay for more, right? For any other phone, like traditional phone, not the smartphone. Actually, for the smartphone, we pay more, like significant more for that one. But if Steve Jobs or maybe other people bring us and then they say, okay, this is the things, this is the phone, and we bring a lot of innovation, so they will not pay for that one, right? So, but when we find that is really valuable and this is like a life-changing, society-changing technology, so then actually we pay ourselves. So I believe, yeah, rephrase actually is quite important. And thanks for bringing these points.
A kind of a follow-up question also from our viewers. Isn't it the cost of 5G modules that is keeping the enterprise edge from adapting 5G faster?
Can I can, of course, you find in my mind, at least the discussion we have with enterprise the customers, you find all kind of use cases. And then, of course, it's hard to have a yes/no answer to this question. I think in some case we had, for example, a brand new hospital was to be built and they wanted an autonomous network, an edge on campus, because they want to run the hospital independently of what happens elsewhere in the world. And then they said they wanted, as a starting point, they wanted only 5G and everything. And then we reminded them that that you have to replace all your handsets for the ones working there if you want to only have 5G. And then they kind of, okay, maybe we can also do 4G. So to some extent, it's important to have this discussion about with the customers on the use cases and what they really need. Then we see that some of these other use cases which are very, very much business critical, this is not really a factor for them. It's so much important, that this works. It has the capacity. They are kind of stable, and and then actually they appreciate that 5G provides additional security and those kind of things. So they don't really mind if the device itself or the module itself is kind of twice the price, because getting out of business is many more more costly than that. So it's important to be a bit nuanced, I guess, on the use cases for this, at least in my mind.
Exactly. I agree with Terry. I think that for the right organization with the right use cases, the payback is fast enough that the current costs are not an issue. I do think because we're still at a relatively early stage that that the understanding of the business cases to support those investments, that's still evolving, and sometimes not necessarily not well understood. And so sometimes that's the challenge in the organization, is in some of these cases, a lot of the use cases we're talking about, they're new technologies there. And so you have to get the buy-in to the value that it will bring to the business. But I think as we see more published examples of that and the payback, I don't think it's a massive issue. No, I mean, obviously, adoption's always faster if something's cheaper. We would all like for all of our services to be free and all of our costs to be zero, but that's not the economic reality that we live in.
One more question from our viewers. Maybe Charlie, you're the right person to answer that. What are the major attack vectors you see in private 5G and in public 5G?
Well, I'm certainly not expert on 5G. There are panelists here that have a gazillion times more expertise there, so I won't attempt to answer that. And I'll go back to Dr. Prasad's example of defining the edge, right? So one sensor, on considering that the edge, that's really going to be difficult to secure by itself without infrastructure around it that brings that security. An edge computing data center, again, is much more reasonable for us, at least what Hub provides. And again, as I've mentioned, that's essentially creating a secure enclave within the edge computing environment. That's what we would do. That is what we do. So that's an example of minimizing the duplication of your typical security components, firewalls, and application security for applications. So that's what we do. And it minimizes, going back to the cost basis and the cost of entry, some of that aspect as well, where creating an edge computing environment, because I want to be careful now, based on what Dr. Prasad said, that I'm not giving a very broad definition of edge computing here, because some of those examples are very restrictive in how you can secure them if they don't have inherent built-in security. So I do have a little bit of experience in IoT and OT, and I think that's where we would play into those environments that are a bit bigger than a single sensor that requires security by itself, right? And again, that's what Hub will do. I think, one of the examples may be, Terry, this kind of ties back to what you were saying about a hospital trying to use 5G. Well, how do you secure that and maintain the 5G connectivity? Again, I think Johnny mentioned earlier, or Shaitan, about the security that's inherent and built into 5G. But once you come off the network and you're connected to data, that's where we would come in and help protect that data and maintain that low latency, high speed environment, right? So hopefully, again, I've answered the question.
Yeah, thank you,
Charlie, I have one
Charlie.
question
Dr.
to you.
Prasad.
Charlie, I have one question for you from end user
Sure.
perspective.
Mhm.
I think one of the critical security concerns a mobility field to adopt edge compute is how do we secure AI models which are presently running in cloud to ensure that it runs securely in edge. The dimensions in which we are looking into is, one, there could be no connection once the model is deployed on the edge device. How do we ensure that the trainings, which is actually the niche value of the entire model, which has actually gone into the edge, how do we secure the AI model which has learnings in it to ensure that we don't lose on edge?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So we actually have a use case right now and an active POC that solves that or addresses that exact scenario here in the US, which is a healthcare company that's running an AI application in an MSSP. Both companies, most people here would recognize by brand. And that's their challenge exactly, which is, how do I keep the AI engine, allow it to have access to the data, but not to do anything with that data outside of its algorithms, right? Likewise, how do I prevent the MSSP user, who have admin rights, from seeing that data for privacy purposes? So our secure enclave solution addresses that exact problem. So we create that enclave, we isolate the data in the application from each other and from the operator, right? So only the AI engine has access, this is based on permissions, to access the data itself and manipulate it based on the algorithm. So that's an active use case that we're solving today. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
And another question from our viewers, Dr. Prasad. How do industrial companies such as Bosch feel about using 5G on shared spectrum versus licensed spectrum? Does it come into consideration?
Okay, I think it's important that we understand two sides of 5G. One is a public network, which is cellular based. The other one is a sideband. I think there are quite a lot of mature use cases which are using cellular 5G, like a smartphone. The other side, which is actually private sideband of 5G, I think when I speak about mobility use case, be it autonomous driving, be it self-driving, be it tele-driving, most of these needs vehicle-to-vehicle interaction. And to ensure that 5G gets into the vehicle, edge computing plays a role. Let me tell you how. Most of the hardware which is going into the cars needs to build this 5G module on top of it. You cannot add a non automotive certified hardware going into the car. That itself has a defined life cycle. So you need to build a 5G module transceiver with a certain band, go through the automotive certification, then bring that module in the SOP of the hardware, and then try to establish a 5G sideband between vehicle to vehicle. And the story doesn't stop there. Vehicle to X, which is vehicle to infra, vehicle to toll gate, vehicle to another edge server, vehicle to traffic signal. I think the best use of 5G and edge can only be possible with the ecosystem support. It's
Yes.
not just whether it is a tele service provider, whether it is a hardware service provider, whether it is a domain. I think as an ecosystem, everybody has to actually understand the necessity, work on some standards and ontologies, and then create that seamless handover of network from one service to the other service to ensure that all the ecosystem players act on a common platform.
Yes.
Dr. Prasad, thank you. And thank you everyone for your vast insights and for a really wonderful discussion. These were all super fascinating topics related to emerging security challenges. And I'm so glad we got the time to cover them today together. Now, anyone who might have a question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box below or in the chat section. That works too. Okay, we're gonna give you a couple seconds to drop your questions. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers, Charlie Robertello, Stephen Spellacy, Chetan Kumar, Johnny Elam, Elizabeth Ramsey, Dr. Guru Prasad, and Terry Gensen. We look forward to hosting many more discussions like these in the future. To stay up to date on upcoming webinars, follow Hub Security on LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
It's